Good evening, everyone. It is Thursday, February 4th, 5:15, and we will proceed with the council budget session. We'll do the Pledge of Allegiance first. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Let the record show that all are present except Councilman Fleshner. He should be coming shortly. And we will get started with the budget. Gerald or Laura, you want to start? Let's Shannon go. Yep.
Appreciate it. So tonight we did ask to get on the agenda with a request that would impact budget for the next fiscal year. We're asking for an allocation of about $25,000 to be held in city budget for community marketing. Just to back up a little bit, at the planning session that the city held back in August, did participate, and a lot of discussion was held on around marketing and who really is responsible between city, chamber, and CADC. It's discussed and who should lead that effort, but essentially at the end of the day it really is a partnership between the three of us to put our best foot forward for Carroll. So the programs that really brought about this discussion came out of the new service that Western Iowa Networks has to offer with the gigabit download speeds. And we aren't talking about promoting one entity or necessarily even one utility, but by having such a fiber-rich network out here in rural Iowa, Western Iowa, it really is a benefit that we can offer. It's a competitive advantage that not a lot of other communities our size have to offer. So, it really is important for us to try to stay a foot ahead of that as we look at how technology is changing and increasing in what's being invested. It's really important for us to take advantage while we have that asset and trying to recruit people, for example, stay-at-home, work-from-home types of businesses, other data businesses that CADC has really taken the charge with that, and also just people in general, resident recruitment for those types of community amenities that people may be looking for. So in the process of those discussions that have really started since Western Iowa Networks asset went into place, Megan and Chuck have done an excellent job of researching what other communities across the country have done with that asset, how they've tried to sell that and set themselves apart and take advantage of that network availability. So I know that Megan has had some one-on-one conversations with you guys regarding Mitchell, South Dakota, and just, that is one example of how a community can take advantage of what's out there in terms of marketing plans. But essentially, though, backing up to our request, we're asking for an allocation in the city budget, not to be dispersed until a committee is put together. We have a marketing plan in place. And with having the fiscal year not starting until July, that really gives us some time to get things in order, to work with the city, with CADC and Chamber, and kind of identify how we should go about this process. The Chamber itself, we've recently hired marketing staff, got a professional background in marketing that can help take us to another level. Last year we did our website work to be able to offer a more robust system for residents and businesses well beyond Carroll County and even the state of Iowa. We have a mobile app to help with our resident recruitment and job postings. And CADC has worked with Western Iowa Advantage and a national site consultant to do a target industry study and really prepare us for data recruitment. We know what kind of requirements we have to have, and we've certainly put ourselves out there in the data networks. One example, through trade shows that we've attended, Hewlett-Packard was present and have offered us the opportunity to be at Data Center Dynamics in April as a rural community looking at data and to kind of talk about new opportunities locating outside of those typical areas that you'd see data projects happening. Iowa has an excellent reputation with having some of the big names, the Google, the Facebook, locating here, but I guess that all just leads back to the conversation to say we have an opportunity to be a couple steps ahead of other communities with this fiber asset that we have. So we really would like to work forward and try to put our foot out there, put the community out in front of some new audiences, and try to do some recruitment for Carroll. So.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Megan is here if anyone has any questions about some of the research that she's done. Certainly she can answer those questions.
Do you want the funding towards the chamber or CADC?
You know, what I would envision happening is that, like I said, we kind of have a task force of all the entities working together. And then as a plan is in place, that would probably be allocated to CADC just for simplicity purposes and financials. But certainly I wouldn't ask that the funds be dispersed until we were ready and we had a
Okay.
project that was laid out in front of the council.
Okay.
Any
other
questions?
for Shannon?
Not at this time. I'm sure there'll be more to come forward
Yes,
later.
absolutely, and certainly feel free. I know you guys have a lot on your agenda, so I tried to just make it quick and painless. But, you know, as you think through those things and see other ideas and opportunities, certainly let us know. You know, we have a professional on staff now. I don't have a marketing background myself, so we're always looking to learn and learn through example as well. So we're happy to hear from you guys. And as mentioned, certainly want to partner with you moving forward to make sure that we are covering all of those quality of life and business assets that we have to offer. So that's all
Okay.
I've got.
Thank you, Shannon.
Yes, thanks for your time.
Megan, I know I saw you here.
Yeah, no, just if you have any questions, she
Okay.
covered it well, so.
All right.
Well, and I was just going to say, it's Megan's fault the internet was down.
Oh.
If anyone has-
It was really fast response, though.
Okay, thank you. All right, so we move on, because we've got a lot to cover. Do you want to go next?
Yes, I will.
Start.
I will take council through basically tabs A, B, and D, and we'll pick up C with all the departmental requests as they go through their budgets. So if you'll flip behind tab A, Gerald has his summary cover memo, and I believe we'll cover everything that's in there throughout going through the budget, through the budget, so I will not go through each one of those items. If you look on page 1 and page 2 are our projected balances. Page 2 is actually the re-estimated information for our fiscal 16, the year that we're currently operating under. Part of the budget process is always to take a look at, now that we're at least halfway through our year, is to look at how do you think you're going to end your year now that we've had half of it gone? How are you going to end your year? This gives a better idea. Then that information then rolls forward into our fiscal 17, in this case, our next year's budget, fiscal 17. The things I will highlight on here is some of the different terminology that we talk about when we talk about different funds. If you walk with me through, and we'll walk down each of these items, each of these funds. The general fund depreciation, and the hotel motel tax, when we do reporting, they're all considered general fund. Even though we have hotel motel tax split out separately, that's just so we can make sure we track the revenue coming in and how we're spending it. But when I do the reporting, and when you see reports for the annual financial report in our budget document, it's all grouped into one slot, actually one column on the documents. The general fund is projected to be ending at roughly 25.7% of our revenue. Our goal has always been to be 25%. In years past, we have ended higher than that, so we're hoping that this is a very conservative ending balance, that will actually end higher than that. Going down then, if you look at the road use tax, and if you go all the way down to the fund called crime prevention / special projects, these are what we call our special revenue funds. The key behind those is we're getting a specific type or a special revenue from some type of a funding source. For example, road use tax, and that you have to then use the money for a specific purpose, in that case, roads, and only road-related expenses. TIF is another one, and that's all those items where you see the UR, that means urban renewal, those are our TIF funds. So we're collecting tax increment collections through the taxing process that we are then turning around and we're using to repay or fund public improvements within an urban renewal area. The local option sales tax, that is a special revenue that the citizens of Carroll voted to have 25% of it go towards tax relief. And currently we are using that in the form of our debt service levy, which we'll talk a little bit more later. And then the remaining amount that we collect, council can use towards any project they deem necessary. Then after that, and as you can see, all these fund balances, if you look down on the very right-hand side of the page, they're all in a positive position. No negatives, we don't want to end the year or plan to end in a negative position. If you think of each of the funds, one way to think of it is its own checking account or checkbook. So you don't ever want to go negative, though I know it may happen sometimes. You don't want to go negative, that you want to plan to have revenue coming in and only spend the revenue that you have, just like you do in your personal homes. Okay, so after the special revenue, the next line is the debt service fund. That is a fund that we use to pay for our principal and interest on our GO debt, our general obligation debt. Then the funds that start with the CP stands for capital projects. Those are the bigger ticket items. Typically the projects cost, or the pieces of equipment cost, greater than $25,000, and they may take multiple years to repay, or to actually construct or do the projects. So those are eligible to be put into these CP or capital projects. Then the next two funds are the Perpetual Care and the Rec Center Trust Fund. These are what we call our permanent trust funds. This is where anytime you make a deposit into these, we call that the principal deposit, and the principal amount must remain intact. We can only spend the interest out of there. Though what we're proposing in this budget is any interest that's getting allocated to these funds, would want council to consider just to leave it in the fund, so that eventually you can grow that balance, and when interest rates hopefully maybe get a little higher sometime in the future, you'll actually have a pot of money that can earn some decent interest. The interest can be transferred out of those into the general fund, or in the rec center's case, the rec center trust fund, to be used for, in the Perpetual Care, for costs to maintain the cemetery, and in the rec center for rec center improvements, or things to be done at the rec center. The next group of funds here are the water, the sewer, and the stormwater. These are all called our enterprise funds. These funds are supported 100% by user fees. They cannot be supported by taxes. So if you're running in a deficit, you need to take a look at your rate structure and figure out how to get some more money or cut back your expenses. And then the final one is our medical insurance internal service fund. We use that as a reserve account to build up for the buffering if if health insurance rates would happen to skyrocket, and so that we don't have this huge spike in needing to get revenue in the form of tax collections. So if our health insurance rates would go up considerably, we could always use this reserve fund balance here. And also with that, the reason we started this is we started partially self-funding our deductible and our co-payments a number of years ago. So we never know for sure what kind of an expense or exposure we're going to have in any one year if employees have, because they have the opportunity to get reimbursement for some of if they have major medical expenses. I did a quick calculation based upon the number of employees and the types of plans between, we only offer a single or family. We don't have any other mix in there if it's a married or employee spouse or whatever. We just have the two types of plans. Currently, based upon the higher deductible plan that we purchased, our risk of exposure is just over $500,000, plus any exposure we have for the co-pays and office visit, the co-pays for office visit and prescriptions. So we're projecting to end fiscal 17 at $577,000. I believe that's probably a good reserve there now that we'll take a look at how we're doing that in the future and what we're charging each of the departments for funding that. Are there any questions in particular about the balances, why they're at where they're at, any types of funds that we have before we move on?
How's the insurance, the internal service, the med, how is that funded? Does that come from a general fund, or does that come out of the employees' checks? How does that?
It's a number of items. Yes, the contributions or the amounts that the employees pay goes into that fund.
Okay.
As well as we, I'm going to say, charge each of the departments based upon the employees that are in those departments. We charge the departments an amount. And so if I'm charging the employees that are accounted for in the general fund for that expense, and then how that gets funded in the general fund is then through the employee benefit levy.
Okay.
And then the ones that are employees that are paid are funded by water and sewer rates. Those departments are getting charged for that, and then the water and sewer rates are covering that. Yes.
Okay.
Okay, any other questions? Okay, then we will move on to tab B. Okay, so page 3 and 4 does a valuation comparison. If you start on page 4, this is the assessed values. This is where it all starts, is with the assessed values. And we get that information from the county auditor's office, who gets it from the county assessor. So our assessor sets the rates in the county. Couple things, overall, the total city assessed valuation went up just almost 2.4%, which the key points that I would point out, and I think is quite remarkable that we did see an increase this year, was if you look up towards the top, we have a new category called multi-residential property. This is as a result of the Senate File 295. That valuation came out of the commercial property line item. So if you look at the commercial property line item, it shows a change of a negative $45 million from the prior year. Well, part of that is because $36 million of it came and went into the multi-residential. The other reason there was that big decrease in the commercial is the county did a revaluation of all the commercial property in the county. So that is impacted in there as well. There was no state equalization order this year, or excuse me, there was one, but Carroll County did not receive one. They do state equalization orders every 2 years. And I've got a little bit of history when we get back to some of the other charts of what we've had in the past. And then I'll point out that the TIF values, you'll see under the urban renewal downtown area, roughly almost a $4 million decrease there. In talking with the county auditor, the main reason is because of the revaluation that the county went through. Then so from the assessed values, then the rollbacks get applied to get to our taxable valuation. So if you go back to page 3, you'll see that the residential rollback decreased very slightly from 55.7% in fiscal 16 to 55.6% in 17. So not a huge change there. The multi-residential, since that was coming out of the commercial line item, and that had already been rolled back to 90%, it took one step more of a rollback. It went to 86.25%. There's going to be a 3.75% rollback on that property classifications for the next 7 years until we eventually get to the residential rollback rate. That was another thing that came out of Senate File 295 that was passed 2 years ago. Does anybody have any questions on this? So some of those Senate File 295 things are starting to come into play, and if you look, our taxable valuation in the middle, basically when we apply all the rates except for the debt service, we're applying the debt service, or excuse me, the levies to a taxable valuation that went up roughly 1.3%. And I think that's pretty good that we were able to overcome some of those rollbacks, that we saw some actual growth in the community. Are there any questions on those 2 pages? On page 5 shows a history of what the residential rollback has done. Now the residential rollback is tied to what the ag land, is it production, Gerald, or valuation? Production. Production does in the state of Iowa.
Correct.
And Senate File 295 also capped it at you cannot grow more than 3% in any 1 year, or they cap it at 3%. And you'll see that in fiscal 08, the very first year on this chart, we were at 45.6% at the rollback, and now we're at 55. So production, egg production is going up, as we're seeing with the rollback in the residential property going up. On page 6, we take all the values, all the different classifications, and put them together. Instead of just the residential, this is everything. So you can see how the total valuation has done over the past 10 years. So to give you just a little bit of background information of why we're seeing jumps, ups and downs, in fiscal 9, the 8-9 year, there was a state equalization order of a 6% increase on the residential property. And I said that the equalization orders occur every 2 years. So then in 11, there was no equalization order. So as you can see, the total valuation went up. So that was growth in the community. Then in fiscal 13, there was a state equalization order on the commercial property at 6%. And then in fiscal 15, you see quite a jump there. There was another state equalization order where residential was 10% and the commercial was 32%. But this was also the first year that we started seeing some of the Senate File 295 items come into play, where we had the commercial rollback to 95%. Then in 16, that commercial rollback went to 90%, so you can see a decrease there, so there must not have been a huge amount of just overall valuation growth in the community. And then in 17, we had a slight increase, even though we had the county revaluation and the new multi-residential rollback started, and no state equalization order. So that gives you a little bit of a history of kind of what was going on in this past 10 years with evaluation. But overall, I mean, we can be very happy and proud that we've had growth in the community over the last 10 years. Any questions about those two charts? Any thoughts? Okay, page 7 and 8 really gets into a lot of, I'm going to call it the meat of our budget. As you know, when we talk about the budget and the amount of taxes we're going to generate, there's two components that make up the actual dollars generated. The valuation, which we don't have very much direct control over. We have indirect control over about the type of community that we are, and the type of things that we provide will, in essence, help define what the valuation is. But the control that you have as the council is what we set the levy at. We are proposing for fiscal 17 a levy that is basically flat, actually down a half a penny from 11.58 down to 11.57.6. It's made up of the different components as you see outlined here. The general fund is the 810. That's the cap, that's the most that we can generate or ask for the general fund, what we call the general fund. This is the revenue that we use to fund a bulk of the general fund and the different operations and the day-to-day operations of the city. Next is the debt service levy. That is the money necessary to pay principal and interest on any outside borrowing that we do. And we've got more information about the debt service levy in tab D, which we'll get to in a little bit. The next one is our special revenue employee benefits levy. This is the taxes that we asked for to help pay for the employee benefits of the city employees. The FICA, IPERS, municipal fire and police, and the health insurance. Next is the special revenue emergency levy. As you can see, the last 3 years we have not had that, largely due to we had a huge valuation increase and it was not necessary to ask to have additional taxes. We had been generating roughly $100,000 from the 27 cents. This is one that it can be brought back into the equation if it's needed later on. If we feel there's a need to have more taxes to fund, this would be to fund general fund operations, the day-to-day operations. Then the final column here is the liability and property insurance. This is the money that we asked for to help, like it says, for the property insurance, liability, the worker comp. This amount, this levy is, you would take a look at the amount necessary, where the special revenue emergency and the general fund have cap amounts. The debt service, the employee benefits, and the property liability insurance levy, all you need to take a look at the amount of money necessary. There is no cap on those. But then there's also want to make sure that you keep the overall levy in check. Are there any questions about the actual levy itself? Page 8 goes into and shows the actual tax dollar asking.
I have one question, the special revenue fund.
Okay.
When, I don't recall being involved, but did we vote to stop that at the time?
We don't,
Is that how that
you don't
works?
necessarily have to have a direct vote to stop it, just like you wouldn't have to have a direct vote to bring it back on. It was something that a proposal was made during the budget discussions, and we said it doesn't look like we need to have the extra monies available, or we don't need those tax dollars to fund the day-to-day operations.
Okay.
And the adoption of the budget includes the setting of the levy rate.
There are a bunch of different types of levies that could be implemented. Some of them are council-driven, that council could make the decision. Some of them are citizen votes. But then they would have to be for specific purposes. And I don't know, at this time, I don't think we need to take a look at those, or we're not in the need to look at what kinds those are. When you see the budget document that I have to file with the state, what we call the certification page will have a listing of all those. And you can see some of them don't necessarily apply to what operations we have in the city. I'm trying to think off the top of my head, one is for maybe
Band, city band is one.
band,
Transit. is
transit,
another.
right, we don't have a transit system in
There's
the
a
city.
laundry
now.
list.
That the city owns, I should say, that the city owns.
Special parks, isn't it, Jack? I think 75 cents you can put on.
I don't know, there's a laundry list, but we don't feel they were necessary at this time. Page 8 takes a look now, after applying the levy to the valuation, then you get the actual tax dollars generated. And there is an increase of roughly $62,000, which is about a 1% increase over the tax revenues from last year. Does anybody have any questions over the levy being proposed? Oh, one more key point I think I'll make at this point is under the special revenue employee benefits. You can see that it was over $1 million asking, and then it has come down, and we're just over 800,000 the last couple of years. I'll point out at this point that we took a look at keeping the levy steady, I should say, and not having that go up, and use general fund reserves. That we are roughly using $258,000 of our general fund reserves to cover our anticipated employee benefit costs instead of asking for the taxes. And we're still projecting to end the general fund ending balance at over 25%, or right at 25%.
The tort liability, is that for 15, 16, 16, is that just is it both 200,000, is that just an estimate? Or are you?
It is, I do have to take a look over time how much money we're collecting each time for that specific category and what we're spending. And if we over collect, then I figure that in to the next year's asking. And in this case, it's going to be pretty close that I don't think we're going to over collect or under collect, and it is an estimate. Yes, we do have to estimate where we think we're going, but we've over collected the last couple of years. So.
Part of that has to do with the fact that we have a very favorable rate with worker comp. Oops, am I on the wrong
Yes, no,
one?
that is
No,
correct.
yeah,
Worker
that-
comp goes into
yeah,
that,
worker
yes,
comp
and we
goes
have seen, yes, our worker comp rates have
It's
not
going
been as
down
much as
again.
what we have anticipated. Though I anticipate those, yes, maybe to stay fairly flat, but for a couple of years in there, we've been understaffed, and now we're back at full staff in a lot of our departments. And so we may see that come into play where we're maybe not see as much of a decrease as we had, even with the mod going down.
But I think worker comp is under special employee benefits, isn't it?
No, worker comp is
It's
under the
under
tort
tort,
liability,
okay.
yes.
And she keeps a running balance.
Yep.
Is it plus or is it minus?
Do you have a specific equation that you pull the levy from? I mean, looking back at the, I guess, revenue expenses projection going forward as far as what the budgets, or what the balances will be for each one, it's not like you're keeping them exactly even. We're cutting into some of them and stuff. Do you use as far as coming up the levy? That's what.
Not necessarily. Some of the years, well, if you go and if you look back at some of the years where we were $13 maybe in fiscal 8, we did have some projects that we did that increased the debt service levy. Then as for it coming down and where we're at, we'll take information from council if they have ideas on what they want to see the levy to be done, and we can say, yes, it can be done, or no, it can't be done. Talking with the mayor and in the mayor's years past, do they want to see the levy the same? Do they want to see it lower? You know, then we'll see what we can do too, if they want to see a lower levy, how we can work that in or not.
Okay.
So no, there is not any magic formula or any specific way to say this is how you come up with it. Other than you have to have specific expenses to ask for those specific tax dollars. And if you don't have those expenses, then you shouldn't be asking for those tax dollars.
Okay.
I think it's important for you to note when she said that we're going into the reserves to the tune of about $250,000, because that's one-time money. You can't replicate that again next year unless you have we have fuel in here at $3, and that's not a huge part of our budget. But if it's $2, then that saves 1/3 of it. But somewhere along the way, as you keep pushing this forward, and I've wondered when it would come, and it hasn't come yet, we'll have to start raising the levy back up if we're going to continue to provide the same services. Because when your labor costs rise, all your insurance items rise, and you don't have that kind of a rise in your taxable value, of which we did not this year, it's 1.31 or something of that nature.
Oh, yeah, overall.
And
taxable.
your salary increases are 2+, and your operational costs are 2+, or 3+, or whatever it might be, then that will catch up with you eventually.
Because once that money is spent out of the general fund,
Yeah, that's one time.
unless you raise taxes, you're not gonna recoup that to replenish it. It's gone.
And as you well know, we're conservative budgeters. We put in expenses that we consider to be not having to amend the budget. And almost every year, there's been a refund, but in the police department, we're fully staffed, there will not be that much money available there. There are other places that it will not be available. We're not in dire straits, but you can't take $250,000 every year and put it into your budget and not know what the next year is going to catch up.
It's ideal to try and keep that reserve at around 25%, isn't it?
Yes,
If I'm not mistaken.
yes.
Okay.
Yes, the bond rating companies take a look at that, where your reserve is at, and 25% is kind of the minimum. So when you do look at, like Gerald says, we budget conservatively, and when you look at our audit reports, we've been ending the year a lot better than that. Hopefully it'll continue that way, but yes, we do not want to, or I would not suggest taking a look at going below that 25%.
Below that 25%, right.
Okay, are there any more questions on page 7 and 8 about the levy and the tax revenues? Okay, the next 2 pages are very similar in that we look at the tax impact that this proposed levy will have on different valued properties within the city. On page 9, we look at the residential side, and page 10 is the commercial side. So on the residential side, let's take a look at, and we'll walk through an example here of a home assessed at $120,000, because I believe that's fairly, a pretty good estimate or median home value in the city of Carroll. If you look at fiscal 15 to 16, there was roughly a decrease of $5 overall, the overall tax bill. That was due to that the levy from those 2 years went down roughly 40 cents. And then from 16 to 17, not quite as big of a change, $1.84, but still down from the city's perspective, because the levy is being proposed to go down a half a penny. And the rollbacks are correct as figured in for what those fiscal years are. And the rollback is something that we don't have control over. The state determines what that is and tells us this is what it is.
When do you usually get that information?
November.
November, okay.
Ish. They may have some early projections out late summer, early fall, but it doesn't get finalized, I don't believe, until like November.
Okay.
Maybe October, end of October. And then on page 10, it's the commercial impact. From fiscal 15 to 16, you can see on that first one for a commercial property assessed at $5 million. There was a rollback at 95%, and then it went to 90%, plus the levy went down 40 cents, so there was a $4,800 decrease in the tax bill. And then from 16 to 17, the rollback stayed the same at 90%, because Senate File 295, that's the, I don't know if you want to so-called, the cap of the rollback for commercial properties is 90%. And then the levy is being proposed a half a cent down, that it's a $25 decrease on the tax bill. Are there any questions?
Was that stopping at 90%?
Yes,
Okay.
yes. Page 11 and 12 kind of go together. Page 11 takes a look at if your home was assessed at $120,000 in fiscal 16. I break it up into a pie chart to show you what percentage of your tax bill goes to each of the different taxing entities. As you can see, the city is at just over 45%. The school's at 30, almost 35%, and the county's at 16%, and then there's a couple small other ones in there. So a good portion of it is going to the city, but you're living in the city, you've got city services that we're providing to you. On page 12, it just takes a historical look at that same information of the breakdown of what percent the tax bill goes to each of the taxing entities. Page 13 and 14 is a comparison of the tax levies of what we would call our comp group, or communities that have a population roughly similar to ours, between 8,000 and 12,000. So these are the consolidated, is on page 13, and the city levies on page 14. These are the levies for fiscal 16, the year that we're currently under, because obviously that's the most recent information that we have available to us. As you can see on the consolidated, Carroll, the city of Carroll has a consolidated levy that's the lowest out of our comp group by almost over $5 per 1,000 of taxable valuation. As you know, there's other components, so the school district and the county are doing their part, as well as the city, to come up with that, and I would say that we're doing a good job to keep the rate down and only asking for the taxes that are necessary.
Laura, we've moved to the right on this chart, haven't we,
Over time we have, yes, over the past few years. I can't remember, I want to say last year we maybe were the lowest as well, but a few years ago, maybe 3 or 4 years ago, we were maybe third or fourth lowest, yes.
Yeah, when I came on, I think we were about third or fourth, yeah.
So historically though, we've always had a fairly low consolidated levy compared to all the other communities. And then on page 14, we're the second low at $11.58, with Pella being just a little bit under us at $10.20. That one we have gone down to over the past 3 or 4 years as well. I don't know, just trying to help put in perspective of where our levy is, how are we doing compared to other communities, do we think we're in the ballpark or not? I would say yes, we are doing very well compared to others. Does anybody have any questions, thoughts about the stuff that we've talked about so far? I'm going to skip over tab C for a moment, because that's all of our capital items, and all the departments will probably address their capital items when they talk about their individual departmental budgets. And if we go on to tab D for debt, there's just a couple pages in here. 28, I think, is a good planning tool. It is broken up into 3 main sections. The top portion is what we call the debt that is supported by our taxes, or our levy taxes that we ask from the taxpayers. The next section is the debt that is supported by our user rates. Currently, we just have the one, we call it the one SRF loan for the wastewater improvements that we did, what's that been, about 10 years ago now, 12 years ago? And that is what we call revenue debt. It has to be supported 100% by your user fees. So if you're not generating enough user fees to cover your principal and interest, you need to raise your rates. We are not in that situation, we are fine. But that is one section you cannot tax for. And then the bottom one is our tax increment financing, or our TIF. If you happen to issue debt related to an urban renewal area where you did some public improvements and you're collecting TIF, that's where we would show that down here. As you can see, this last year, fiscal 17, is the last year that we would have in a TIF debt related to one particular area, that we would have a principal and interest payment. But we will continue to collect TIF in that area, in the Ashwood area, to help repay that debt over the long haul. We refinanced that a few years, shortened down the amount of years so we could save interest costs on that. Okay, so moving back up to the debt service fund area, we do have a couple proposed GO bonds, or capital loan notes, actually is what they're going to be. And at Monday night's council meeting, we'll be taking, before you will be some more steps to take to go forth on issuing these 2 debts. The first one is what we call the proposed GO bond 2016A. This is for the street sweeper that has already been purchased and it is in service. The street rehab 2015 project that I believe is nearing completion. And then the rec center weight room expansion project that is currently under construction. As you can see, we've got it structured, actually we're making payments on it in this fiscal year 16, and then we've got 17 and 18, so a 3-year issuance there. The next one is a proposed GO bond for the 2016B. In here, we still have it listed, because this information was put together and given to you at the same night that council took action on the rec center locker rooms. So this does show a debt issuance to include the cemetery building, the rec center locker rooms, and the 3rd Street stormwater improvements. Though at the council meeting at the end of January, council at that point had decided not to move forward with the rec center locker rooms at this time. So as we move forward on Monday nights, that information is not as part of your information to take action on that. We're going to be looking at just the cemetery building and the 3rd Street storm sewer. And this, what you see in front of you of this piece of paper has a 10 years financing. The new proposal is for a 6-year, I believe. Yes, a 6-year repayment schedule.
That's a 122, isn't it? Instead of 165 or 160?
220. Yeah.
220.
Yes. We'll probably look at that one to issue, I would say maybe late fall. A lot of that will depend upon how we move through the process for the rec center building, or excuse me, the cemetery building, excuse me. So we know we're in the early stages and planning on that one. So as we go through and keep planning on that one, will largely dictate when we issue that debt. But the reason we have it in here now is we do anticipate to do probably a debt issuance in fiscal 17. We would like, and we do have it incorporated into our tax asking that has generated the levy, the debt service levy amount.
Will that change though, because we're not taking out as much?
No, for fiscal 17, we will, at this point, we will leave it at this asking of $298,000 for that issuance.
Okay.
And then we would just structure the remaining payments accordingly.
The debt service levy though?
The debt service levy, no.
That won't change?
No.
Okay.
Nope. So you can see, okay, so with this, we have all the P&I, what we call the P&I payments, principal and interest payments. And then we have a few different revenue sources that are helping fund these payments. It's not all by the debt service levy. We have local option sales tax, or the lost relief, where that's the 25% that's required to be shown as tax relief. Like I said earlier, this is in the form that we have chosen to show our tax relief is through the debt service levy. We do have the property tax replacement. I'm being a little bit conservative as I show this in here. So how the property tax replacement works is the commercial and then the industrial property is being rolled back to 90%. Currently, the state is paying the cities that rollback amount back to the city. So in essence, we're being held whole for these last couple of years. This $30,616 is actually the amount I'm anticipating to collect in this fiscal 16 year, and then I'm using it to show it as an offset in fiscal 17. And then the $23,709 is the amount based upon the information that I'm putting into my budget. That should be the repayment that I receive for the property tax replacement in fiscal 17. I'm showing it as a deduct off of our 18 levy asking. And I'm being somewhat conservative and waiting to see that we're going to be fulfilled and getting that money from the state before I'm putting it into our levy. So at some point, if the state decides not to fund that and we don't get the money, then it should not have an impact on the current year levy. Then we'll know going forward that we will not be getting that money. That kind of makes sense. I'm a little, like I'm a 1 year behind in putting it into our budget.
You buffered us a little bit.
Yes. And all the other tax replacement monies that we're getting from the state, that relate to the 810 levy, because we get it for all the different levies, the 810 levy, the property, the tort liability, the employee benefits. I'm showing the revenue in that current fiscal year as revenue coming in and we're spending it. But in this one, I wanted to make sure I had the monies available to make sure we can make our principal and interest payments. That's why I'm doing it that way. I don't want the debtors to come knocking on my door and want their payment and I don't have the money. So at the end of, or in fiscal 17, we're asking for $653,230 to pay towards our principal and interest. And you can see over the years, based upon a couple of projections for debt that currently has not been issued, and the debt that is currently issued, we have the structured payments out, what it does to the line that says debt service supported by annual levy. You can see what the tax dollars askings are over the next 10 years. And yes, there is a zero amount in there. And you'll see that the local option sales tax or the lost relief does go to zero because we don't have the debt service to use it. So we'll have to, if we don't.
It has to be reinstated,
Right.
Yes,
because it's got that 10-year.
yes, that's why that is in there, yes. And you can see too in fiscal 19, if this is the only debt we would have outstanding and issue, the tax asking is at $19,000 instead of the $653,000.
A lot of debt drops off in about 2 years.
It does. But I'm confident that there are some projects out there
That will come back.
that will come up. Are there any other questions? One thing that's kind of exciting on here, this is the first year we can see under the SRF loan, under fiscal 26, there's nothing, we're seeing the end of the repayment on that loan.
Yeah, there's a white one on the last line.
Yeah.
So yeah, in my world, I get excited about that.
But that might get taken back up by the sewer, the wastewater treatment plant, won't it? If that comes to fruition.
In all probability, yes.
Yeah, don't burst my bubble yet.
You always have that stuff looming over top, yeah.
Yes. Yes. So yeah, none of that is figured in here because it's too
It's too
premature
soon,
right now,
yeah.
yeah. So this shows, okay, so this is the schedule of payments. The next page, 29, is the principal that's outstanding in each of the years. This is where we use to monitor what we call our legal debt limit. The state code says you cannot have any more than 5% of your assessed value, 5% of your assessed value outstanding in debt in any 1 year. In our case, our total assessed value is just under $775 million. You apply the 5%, our legal debt limit is just under $39 million, and we're proposing to have, even with the two proposed issuances issued in fiscal 17, about $4.3 million. So there's plenty of capacity there to issue debt if needed.
But
And
that debt service levy will go up with the more debt we add on.
depends on how you structure your debt repayments.
Okay.
Yes.
See, we're setting at, what is our payment load, 650 something, but that's
At a dollar,
that's
about a dollar.
buffered off by the sales tax.
Yes, there's
By the-
$350,000 in sales tax revenue that's going into there.
So our actual debt service amount this coming year projected is how much lower? We're asking for how much money? That's
$653,000.
Okay. So you go out here a little ways and see, you can structure this, you see those payments of virtually nothing. So you can structure your payments so that your debt service levy doesn't. You can either raise your levy, pay it sooner, or keep your levy the same, pay it over a longer time.
Okay.
Which typically has been 15, 20 year, 10, 15, 20.
And we've had that debt service levy up much higher than what it currently is, too.
Yes, we have. Does anybody have any questions over the debt information presented?
If none, the balance of the presentations will be done in what we call very brief form, because there is no changes in employees with the exception of 10 hours being added to a library person in this proposal. You know what the increases are. The operational budgets don't have any major amounts, but if you want to ask a question, please do. Otherwise, as we go through, the senior management people will present highlights of their portions. If you have questions, we'll answer them. If you have none, we'll just move on to the next one. That sound all right? Brett?
So under tab E, the police department is the first one on page 30. And I guess the departments, if you guys want to refer back to for your capital items.
Page 15, I think it will start with mine.
Okay,
You can go back to page 15.
That'll show my capital item.
that's under
Put
tab C.
a mark in there, you'll be referring back to it.
Yeah. This is the page 15, and it's like what, 15 through page 19 is what we call more of our recurring capital items, instead of those really big ticket items like we called for the capital projects. It does include those CP capital fund project items, but for each of the departmental, it's more the recurring capital, the police cars, the other types of vehicles, the mowers and things like that. So, sorry, go ahead, Brad.
Okay. For our capital, it's pretty basic, same as last year, or similar to last year, just different projects. We've got anticipating 2 car replacements. We had also anticipated that this year, we pushed one back to next year. So that's at $46,000. The computer equipment that gets replaced within the office is estimated at $6,500. That's been the same for the past few years. Major changes are that we already purchased our tasers and body cams this year. Next year, though, we're anticipating purchasing 1 taser. Reason for that is the captain currently doesn't wear one. With promotion, that captain will be wearing one, and so we're going to replace one for one of the officers that comes on. And same with body cam. We have 1 officer who doesn't have a body cam now because we've had academy times, and so we'll be purchasing one of those for next year. Additional stuff this year that it changes is I put in for $5,000 for security cameras. We put a couple in this year in the hallways, and just the plan would be to kind of increase that, put some on the outside of the building also. Just some extra security for the department, for the city.
Did you put them in the hallways in the police department, or are they?
No, in City Hall.
They're in City Hall.
There's 3. There's one in the library, one in front of the City Hall counter, and then one in front of the police car counter.
Okay, and now you want to do the exterior?
Just a few on the exterior, give us a little bit more security for the building as a whole. We got $2,800 for flashlights. Most of that's just our flashlights are old. The repair is not keeping up, so we're looking at replacing the flashlights that the officers carry. And the preliminary breath test or PVT equipment at $3,300. The state has indicated over the last couple of years that they're going to start decertifying some of the models that departments have. Ours was on the chopping block this last year, got held over for next year, so we're still good with our PVTs, but the chance of that coming back up again is probably pretty high, where they're going to get rid of the older models and kind of keep going to the newer stuff. There's some grants out there too available that we can look at too if we get to that point, but in case we don't qualify for them, I did budget for those replacements at $3,300. It's just 1 per vehicle. Otherwise, any capital changes, that's it. So we estimated this year for $67,500 and next year to be $65,300. Not much of a change really. If you actually go to the budget I have, page 6, to that, if you guys have any questions to that, or I can run through some things where there's any major changes. One of the big ones is our training expense will increase, and that's we're going to have 2 academies potentially next year at about $7,500 a piece to go through the academy. So that's a major increase that we'll see. And then, of course, salary and benefits will show some increase also.
That's from the additional officer?
With the potential of 2. We'll have 1 starting when Captain Hano retires. We'll have 1 that's going to be starting here soon, but his academy don't start until the next budget year, and we'll have 1 then when Captain Hano leaves. So possibility of 2 academy times. So that makes a big increase for our training expenses.
Okay.
So this budget does include them being fully staffed?
Yes.
Police, right.
Last year,
That's
you're
your
fully staffed, this year's fully
15.
staffed.
Yeah, at 15 officers. That's what this the request for next year will show.
Travel and conference, from 5 to 10?
Main reason is we pay people to drive back and forth to the academy, so we see some increases with that. And I think this year, I think my re-estimate was, I have to go back and look at that, but I think I re-estimated higher. I think we're low on that anyway, and so we just bumped it up a little bit.
And just a point on, make a quick comment about the employee benefits, because this is going to affect all the employees. IFRS rate stayed the same. Municipal fire and police went down about 2 percentage points, and there was built in roughly a 10% increase on the health insurance. We don't get our health insurance renewal rate until about April, May timeframe, so it's always a guess. We usually build in a little bit of an increase, even though our past 2-3 years history will tell us we haven't had one. But when it comes to talking to the health insurance consultant experts, they'll tell you, yes, you may have a number of good years, but you're going to have that bad year, and it's coming at some point. You're just not exactly sure what year that may be.
That's your extra $19,000.
From one,
The
yes.
police budget there.
Yep. And then what we'll usually do is, so we'll put in a budget amount of whatever the health insurance is, and then for that budget year, then we'll go through the year, we'll get our actual increase for the next year, and then we'll re-estimate a new amount. And like I said, the past few years, it's been lower, so that's always been a good thing, and so we factor that information in when we do the next year, the ensuing year's budget.
There would be two options if we would have a greater than 10% increase. One is we can carry it as a red into the next year for budgeting purposes, because she accounts for that separately, the authorization for levy. Or we can take money out of that fund that we have, if it's over 10%. Those would be two options. We haven't seen a double-digit raise that I can remember. It's been a long time.
Yeah.
But someday we'll get one. Other questions for Brad?
With the additional officers, you're not getting more cars, just replacing cars.
Well, yeah, just replacement, and that's just through mileage. We
Right.
started getting about between 80 and 100,000, we usually get in the 90 range, and we replace them off them.
Okay. With a lower number of officers, you had lower miles.
Yeah, we just had less miles. When we get up to full staff, we'll see more miles.
More miles on the car.
But we try to get one a year, and I think after 3 or 4 years, we do a double, so we do two. We would typically do one. We would have had one this year, or this next year, but since I pushed the one back for this year, we'll have to do two next year. We don't want to replace two every year, we wouldn't get enough miles on them, but there's one time where we have a rotation of 2 cars in a year.
Ready to move to the fire department?
Okay, on page 15 there, under the capital improvements, you'll see protective boots and equipment under, that's replacement equipment. That's pretty standard at $3,000. And the next line there is additional equipment, and that would be for the additional things that come up throughout the year. We've, purchased some things like to improve our extrication equipment, that sort of thing that comes up. That's what we have that fund for. You'll see in the re-estimates there, there's $42,500. If that was for last year, we received that FEMA grant, of which we have that compressor in, and it's a nice unit. Really is working well. So, getting on to the budget on page 32 for the fire department. We show revenues there of $23,000, and that money comes from the 5 surrounding townships that surround the city of Carroll. Basically, state law requires the township to provide fire protection to their township residents. And around here, they've contracted with the city of Carroll for the fire department for fire protection for their area. So we anticipate revenues there of $23,000 next year. And the only other increase in the budget this year is basically for, my salary is split 2 ways. It's 60% building department, 40% fire, so the slight increase in the fire department budget just covers that, basically healthcare, the little increase and the increase in salary. And I don't know if there's any other questions with the fire department, otherwise it's pretty straightforward on the day-to-day items that we need.
How is the amount that's charged to the townships, how is that determined?
Okay, Laura helped me a lot with that. It's total taxable value in the township, the population and the number of fire calls in those townships, and it's kind of a running average. Laura, would you say, for the fire calls, that sort of thing, so.
It's a ISU formula.
Yes.
That was established about 15, 18 years ago.
Yeah,
That's what
So you do have a formula that you go
Yes.
by?
Yes.
So that may fluctuate from time to time?
yes, it
Yes.
does. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
These are townships in the county that don't have their own fire department?
Right, Jerry, not many do, I mean, most of them
Well,
contract.
just thinking which ones do
Yeah,
and don't.
the other cities, but we have Nice, Grant, Rose, Pleasant Valley, Roselle, and Maple River. Maple River is our biggest township that we cover, so those are the 5 townships we provide protection to. Okay.
You do a lot with a little, chief. Thank you to you and yours.
Yeah, well, I appreciate that, you know, we're really proud of that fact too, and all the members are, so we do the best we can. Okay, moving on to page 33, the building department, building code enforcement. Under the revenues there, that is, it's kind of difficult to predict, I guess, what our revenues would be, but that comes from building permit fees and then all the other associated fees with buildings there. We're projecting revenues of $48,000 for next year, and that's basically, we compute that, and Laura gives us a hand with that on what's been done, the history of the past 5 years. So, you know, hopefully we get that fairly close. We haven't been doing too bad. But again, then the only increase in the building department budget is salary and benefits for Perry Johnson and the 60% of my salary and benefits.
Next one, I think, is Brad's.
Yeah, the siren.
You want to do the communications one, or is that one?
This is the public safety communications.
Yep.
This is the one that includes,
Communications and disaster service.
Yes, on page 34 is public safety communications. As you know, or may or may not know, we split this with the county, and this is set mainly on just wages and some contract work that they have done over there. So this is the 50% that we pay towards the county total amount. On page 35 is the disaster services, and the only change that you'll see in here, electric costs went up a couple $100 from the reestimate to what's recommended for next year. And then equipment replacement, we still have one siren that has to be replaced along with the AC/DC upgrade. We had budgeted $40,000 for it this year. I asked for a bid from the guy who gave it to us, who put the past ones in. His bid came in well above that $40,000, so we decided to just scrap the project. Come back next year, we refinance it through the budget, and hopefully we'll be better off that time.
Is there anybody else that you can submit a bid to?
I'm going to open up to a bid process this year.
Okay.
Since his quote was almost
Yes.
$20,000 more.
See
It was
that.
an eye opener, so I think we'll just open up to a bid this next year and get that final siren replaced. You know, all the rest of them are new, the rotating sirens. This one up on West Anthony is still needs to be replaced though.
Laura, in this case, was this money re-estimated or dropped into the balance, this 40,000?
It would have been dropped into the balance as of the end of fiscal 16 projection and then reallocated in fiscal 17.
And of that 258,000 that you said just a little while ago, 40,000 of that is in that 258. Because it's actually coming out of reserves because you dropped it, you didn't take it. You didn't show it as an expenditure, you showed it as off. So that raises the ending balance. And we're using 258, so you take 40 off of that. So now we're down to 218.
But are you gonna re-estimate that back at 60, since that's what you got that last bid at?
That's in there.
He's got
That's
it.
what he's got in there.
That's what I got
that's
for
what
next
I
year
got.
at
Okay.
60,000. And the
But
bid
this-
was just a little bit, or the quote that he'd given me was just a little bit below that, like 56 or 58,000, so.
But
Why was that one so much different?
I don't know. I think his labor cost, I think went up quite a bit. It was quite a bit more than we had planned on.
Okay, and then I guess we would go to the next section, which is F. And I believe this would be Randy.
Yeah, the first section on page 36 is street construction. There's only 2 expenditures and they're both considered capital items. One is $10,000 for curb, sidewalks and pedestrian curb ramps. That's just for the construction of maybe miscellaneous ramps. We've also used that more recently for the purchase of detectable warning plates for the ramps that are constructed in town. And the second expenditure item is mapping at $6,000. That's just some maintenance of our general city mapping. Unless there are any questions, I'd go on to page 37, roadway maintenance. This portion of the budget is set up for expenditure on roadway-related items that are not eligible for road use tax. We do have a little bit of revenue. That's from street restoration fees. There's a permit system for cutting into the street. The city maintenance personnel replace that and charge it to homeowner or whoever has cut into the street. That's generally what this portion of the budget is set up to reflect. So if there are no questions, I go on to page 38, street lighting. This is the cost of leasing lights from Mid-American Energy. And we have about 940 leased street lights. And we've anticipated about a 2% increase for this next fiscal year in cost.
And this is one of those guaranteed increases because even if we change to the higher efficiency, it's still going to go up.
Yeah, we didn't factor in that change. You know, that contract and agreement was made with Mid-American, and we really don't have any control over how many they're going to change. You know, we left it to where the city would not be buying the change, but we are paying for the change. And so it's completely on their schedule. So as they replace them, those tariffs.
That came up last year, and we're just gonna let them do it
Yes, on their schedule.
on their own, yeah.
Yes.
They put some up down in my neighborhood.
Yeah, there's a few.
Are they a little brighter?
They are, they're very noticeable, they're nice.
They're brighter, but they don't,
Narrower.
they're narrower, the beam is a little narrow, so there are some dark spots in between, but
There's an excellent example on Main Street, right in the area of the Adams Elementary School. There's, you know, those we have them on the davit poles that go both ways over the 2 lanes of Main Street. And as you drive up there, they're all mercury vapor, and there's one that's an LED, and it's really noticeable. And it's interesting just to compare the difference on a roadway.
I don't trip going through the house at night anymore. There's nothing like coming into the window off the snow. It's bright.
yeah, white light.
Can you address the airport one?
Oh, the airport, okay. On page 40, there is, in their current budget, an increase asking of $10,000 for consultant professional fees relating to the lawsuit that's going on right now. Other than that, they don't really have, they're not anticipating any major change in the operations out at the airport. Everything's going to be pretty much status quo. The landfill, this is a section where the city provides a service for the garbage collections. How we do that is we hire 2 garbage contractors in town to pick up the garbage. So this is the revenue side is the garbage fee that you pay on your utility bill is the revenue, and then the expense is paying the haulers for the revenue that we collect, as well as the city has a share of the landfill operations. All the cities, and I'm not sure who all else, but everybody gets allocated an amount that needs to be paid for the operations of the landfill.
Next one then will be back to Randy with the Public Works admin.
This portion of the budget funds our Public Works Administration. There's actually 3 of us in our operation here in the City Hall. salaries for the three of us are distributed among 4 funds, this being the portion of the general fund. And then a portion of our salaries is also from the water utility, sewer utility, and road use tax funds. And that's broken up roughly based on where we spend our time working. When we have a large water project, there's more comes out of the water utility, and then sewer, and whatever. So that's kind of the basic part of this portion of the budget. There is one capital item proposed in here, and that's the replacement of the pickup. The pickup is a 2001, and it's about time for replacement. Unless there are any questions, the next page, 43.
Randy, real quick,
Yes.
just the jump in the travel and conference. 3,500 versus, 1,300, 1,600 last couple of years.
Yeah, there's, in the current budget, it's proposed at 3,000. But we didn't attend everything that we anticipated, as we have not in the past few budgets. But I did put it back in the proposal for next fiscal year. The current budget contains 3,000. The re-estimate is 1,500, so that's what we would expect. We did put it then back in at a little bit higher for next fiscal year. Okay, city garage, this is the maintenance garage operation. It's pretty straightforward, not too much change. We are proposing some overhead door repair replacement at about $10,000. Those doors are kind of in constant need of repair. So other than that, I don't think, no, there are no other items of too much change.
Okay, from there we go to H, and Laura is acquainted with all these, so I will let her give you an overview.
Or G.
G.
I'm sorry. Yep,
You want to
looking
spend
wrong.
the wrong worksheet.
That was a horrible thing, wasn't it?
Tab G is what we call our health and social services section. These are what we call our outside agency funding requests. First is the taxi program. They are not, there's 2 things that go in here. We actually have an outright cash outlay to the taxi program in the amount of $16,000, and that has been constant for the last 3 years, and that's they're asking for next year. As well as we sell taxi tickets in our office downstairs for senior citizens and those
Disabled.
who, what's that?
Disabled.
And those are disabled, yes, that who medically are not able to drive. So we do require that they sign off on one of those 2 items. And so this is just the revenue that we take when they pay us for those, and then we turn around and we pay that money out to Region 12, because it's their program, but we offer to be in a centrally located place for people to come and get taxi tickets from us.
So these are the private cabs.
What's that?
These are to the private cab services, you don't mean the Region 12 vehicles.
Correct.
Okay.
They receive discounted taxi tickets. So
How much are they?
they're $3 for 1 ticket. Or they are sold in books of 10 for $30, so $3 a ticket. And all the cab companies do accept them. Then the next ones, the daycare center, same asking funding request of $14,000. RSVP, same funding request at $11,000. The food pantry has asked for an increase from $3,000 to $5,000, and the reasoning behind that is they are moving. I think they're being forced to move, and they would like to use the additional funding request for additional rental costs that they will probably have. And then new opportunities, the same funding request at $10,920. Any questions on any of those funding requests?
Andy, it looks like you're the next one.
Now H.
So if you go, for the library, if you go back to page 15 for the CIP, we have requested
budgeted 31,000 this year, and that is primarily for tech funds for technology improvements in the library. And what those things would amount to would be, the first one would be replacing the remaining XP computers in the library. So we have 10 public access computers on the adult side. 8 of those are still XP machines. And XP is no longer supported by Microsoft. And so what we're finding is we have lockdown software on those that will prevent patrons from making any changes to the hard drives. But what we're seeing is that there are certificate issues with the older version, and so when patrons go online and they want to fill out a form to apply for a job, it won't let the form go through. So it's giving us that off snap message. And Computer Concepts is telling us we need to replace those pretty quickly. So that is a big chunk of that. The second item that we wanted to be able to do is to upgrade our integrated library system. So our catalog was last updated in 08-09, and a lot has changed since then. If we upgrade to a software called Apollo, it actually would be a much better patron experience. They would be able to search better than our current catalog. That Apollo software includes a more responsive mobile interface, so patrons can actually use it on their phones and their tablets with greater ease. It connects with our current digital databases, actually, which is a very exciting thing because for a long time we've had our catalogs, and then libraries have all these other databases. We have the Zinio e-magazines, we have the e-books with bridges, and they don't talk together. So this new software with Apollo actually will allow patrons to only log in one time into our catalog, and then they can access those other services without logging in again. So that would be a big improvement. And also upgrading our PC reservation system. So on all of those public computers downstairs, the software that we have on them right now works fine, but it doesn't allow for mobile printing. So if anybody wanted to print anything from the library from a different device, which more people are going to their tablets and their smartphones to work, if they come into the library to use our Wi-Fi, they can't print right now. So upgrading that software would improve that ability for mobile printing. We'd also like to do a tablet lending program for children. And we are writing grants right now for STEM kits for programming for kids and adults. So you may have heard of the Governor's STEM Council. They have what they call scale-up grants, and schools and libraries can apply for those. So we're applying for one for STEM programming for children, and then there's another opportunity called Pushing the Limits, and that would be to provide those STEM type programs for adults too in the library. So if we don't get those grants, it would be nice to have an amount in there to be able to purchase that stuff is not cheap. Those 3D printers and all that stuff is pretty expensive. So another portion of that request is for those types of things. So like I said, the technology request, I think it's just time to upgrade some things. The last upgrades we've done in all of these different areas were in 08-09, and a lot has changed since then. So we actually will work to develop a computer replacement plan going forward, so that instead of asking for a big chunk of money in the future to replace PCs, we'll be doing it on a more regular basis every 2 years. So maybe every year or every 2 years we'll be replacing 2 to 4 computers. So it's easier on our budget than it would be if we asked again for a larger amount. And then if you go back to page 50, the library budget. The additional amount that we're requesting is to, like Harold said, is to move that one library staff person from 30 to 40 hours of benefits.
Questions for Brandy?
The computer, do you mostly desktops downstairs, or do you have laptops? Are you going to convert to laptops? Or keep them all
Trustees
desktops?
have talked about that. We have 6 laptops right now, and they have talked about doing a laptop checkout program instead of replacing all of those with desktop models, actually checking out the laptops so that patrons can sit anywhere they want to.
Right.
And all the software would work. I've checked into it, and all the software that we have, that PC reservation, all of that works on laptops just as well as it does on desktops. So that's an option that trustees are willing to move forward with if they're able to replace a lot of those. I think that's a pretty good option, actually, that flexibility.
Any other questions of Brandy? Historic preservation is pretty simple.
Yeah, they don't have any major projects, funding requests in here. I believe the $1,000 that's in here for this fiscal budget is for the historical history of the building's plaques to be put on, which we talked with Barbara Hackford today, and they are ready to go. We just have to work on installing them.
Was the city gonna do that?
Yes.
Yes. And since Jack has worked so diligently to prepare the pizza,
Yes.
Should we take a break?
perhaps Mr.
Yeah.
Morris would be good.
Love the idea of having a
Sounds
full
good.
stomach before we go to lunch.
It's gonna take a full while.